Hi, I'm Margaret, and thank you so much for joining me here on The Gardening Me. Last week, I went plant shopping, and I got quite the haul of plants. Now, I'm not going to go through all the plants I got, because that would take all day. But I am going to go through a few. I think I picked around 12 that were particularly intriguing to me, and I thought it would be fun to share. Now, every year I go on a little bit of a plant shopping expedition, actually twice a year normally. And what I do is I just go out to the garden centers, and I don't have a plan about what I want or what I need. I literally go in and just look around, and if I see something that looks interesting or intriguing or I've never heard of before, I may do a little bit of a Google search on my phone just to make sure it's not some invasive variety or something like that. But otherwise, I love doing this because I have discovered dozens and probably even hundreds of different varieties of plants doing this. And I usually do a shopping trip like this both in the spring and in the fall. Now, this year, because I had the big vegetable garden restoration project to do in the spring, I never actually got out and did that. So I kind of went a little bit crazy. Now, I do have planned shopping as well, in that I will say, oh, you know what, I really think that this type of plant or whatever it is, this color would go really good here. And so then I will go out and specifically search out that particular plant or whatever, that particular variety. If I see something that's particularly interesting, I keep using the word particularly a lot. But anyhow, if I see something that's really interesting that I think would go great in a section of the garden or something like that. But that is kind of a different type of shopping trip. That's more of a shopping trip with a purpose. This is a shopping trip that is a fun, who knows if I'm going to come back with anything. I might come back with nothing. That's never happened, but I might. Or I might come back with an entire truckload of stuff, which has happened. Well, I think it always happens, but that's beside the point. Now, one thing you'll notice is all of the plants I got are in 1 gallon pots or smaller. I generally stick to that size of pot, the smaller pots, for perennials and for shrubs specifically. I guess you can get shrubs in much larger sizes, but I prefer the smaller pots, and there are a number of reasons for that. First and foremost, of course, is cost. I can buy a lot more plants if I keep the cost per plant down. So that's, of course, a big reason. The one exception to the small pot rule is when I purchase trees. I will often get those in larger pots, or shrubs that grow a little bit more slowly. So those I will bite the bullet, and I will get pots that are 2, 3, up to 5 gallons. One year I actually did get a tree in a 7-gallon pot, and it was hard going getting that thing in the ground, because another reason I like the small pots is because they are much easier to plant when you have to dig a hole this big versus this big and this deep. Our soil is exceptionally rocky, and it takes a lot of effort even getting a small plant in. The soil itself is beautiful, like the actual soil is quite, loamy, I would even say. But there are so many rocks in it that it's hard going to actually dig a hole. And you never know if you're going to hit a rock this big or a rock this big. Sometimes I have to completely change my placement because I end up hitting a rock that is just too large to go around. So that's kind of the situation we're at here. And 1 gallon or smaller pots, much easier to deal with. The last reason why I prefer to get plants in smaller pots when I do these shopping trips is because all of these varieties are new to me. In some cases, the plant itself is new to me. I've never grown that type of plant before. And in other cases, it's the variety that's new. I may have that plant in the garden, but it's a completely different variety. So I don't know how well that particular plant is going to do in my garden. And sometimes plants don't make it. Either they don't make it through the winter, which has happened in the past, or they don't make it through a long, hot, dry summer, which I had issues this year with at least, I think, 2 of the shrubs that I planted last year not making it through the summer. So because of that, I would much rather take that chance on something that's only cost me $15 or $20 versus something that's cost, what, $40 or $50. It's a much bigger hit. So I don't mind taking a risk on something that may be marginally hardy, or something where I have tried that type of plant in the past, but the variety I grew did not work well. Maybe this new one will. I don't mind spending $15 on a plant that may or may not survive, whereas I would have to think long and hard, and I probably wouldn't spend $40 or $50 for that same plant, knowing that there is the possibility it may not come back next year. Now, the one thing about buying smaller pots is that you really don't get a lot of that instant gratification thing that you do when you buy plants in a larger pot. And you have to be patient, because it will take 2 or 3 years even for that plant to really size up. So I'm patient. I don't mind waiting. I like to see the plants settling in, and I actually enjoy the whole process of them flourishing. And every year I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be so good. It's going to be that much bigger and that much fuller and that much taller. I don't know. It's exciting. In addition to the smaller pots, the one other thing that I guess I don't do when I do these particular types of shopping trips is buy multiples of a plant. And it's for the same reason as I gave for the survival, or questionable survival of plants. So I am reticent, and I have in the past purchased multiples. You're supposed to plant in groups of 3 or 5 or whatever. And I have purchased multiples, planted them, and sometimes they didn't come back at all. And I would just kick myself going, ugh, I should have really just tried one of those, see if it survived, then I could have purchased more. And so that's what I do now. Because all of these are new to me, and even when you have grown a particular plant in the past, that's no guarantee that a specific variety of that plant that you haven't grown will survive. So I prefer not to take any chances on that end, and maybe I won't even like the plant. That's very rarely happened, actually. I think, me not liking a plant, but there have been a couple of times where I have purchased things and then I subsequently didn't like it. I can think of one off the top of my head, an obedient plant I bought last year that ended up, it was supposed to be obedient in terms of its spread, or more obedient than the traditional obedient plant. And it really was not. And that one was quickly pulled up from my garden. Thank goodness I didn't buy 4 of them. Now, before we get into the plants, one note I do want to make is that some of these plants are toxic to animals, to dogs, to cats. I would suggest that if you have a pet that likes to run through your garden and chew up things, that regardless of the plant you put in your garden, including any of these, that you do yourself a favor and your pet a favor and do a bit of a Google search just to make sure that there will be no issues having that plant in your garden and having your pet get into it. Because all of these are new to me plants, I actually did a little bit of research after I got home. I didn't want to rely solely on what the tag said. Some of these plants actually didn't even come with tags, and they didn't come with descriptive tags. And so I wanted to give you a little bit more information about each of them. So for each plant, I did a little bit of a Google search and wrote down key facts that I find important to know. Things like hardiness zones, how big the plant gets, whether it's sun or shade, things like that. So this is the first plant I'm going to talk about, and you can guess, this is Gaura. This one is called Crimson Butterfly, and it forms a bushy, compact mound of beautiful burgundy colored foliage. It gets 12 to 18 inches tall and 18 to 23 inches wide, and it is deer resistant, and it blooms in midsummer all the way to fall. I planted Gaura last year for the first time, and I was really surprised that it did so well. I mean, it didn't do amazingly well, but it survived the super hot summer we had and the drought we had. And I subsequently found out that Gaura does exceptionally well in droughty conditions and in hot weather. So I'm a believer. I'm gonna put this, I think, in my west border. I have a dark towers penstemon, I believe, in that border, and I think that's the only really dark kind of perennial I have in there, and I definitely need more. So this is gonna be going in there somewhere. Now, the one thing with Gaura is it is a little bit questionable in terms of winter survival, especially if you tend to have wet winters. I guess it doesn't like wet feet over the winter. So I am going to try to put this in a spot that's a little bit on the drier side and also a little bit protected from our westerly winds that we get here in the winter. This is Forsythia Kumson, and I never thought a Forsythia would knock my socks off without it blooming, but this one did. This guy I'm really excited about. Now, one of the kind of complaints I guess people have with Forsythia is that it's kind of a one and done shrub in your landscape during the season. You get that amazing bloom right in the early spring when very little else is blooming, and then it's kind of just a green shrub for the rest of the season. Now, personally, I don't mind that, because the way I see it, you can't have every plant being a star all the time. That would just create a jumble, in my opinion. You do need those background players to kind of offset the plants that are shining. The thing about this Forsythia is it's one of the only ones that I've ever seen that has 4 seasons of interest. No kidding. The first, of course, is the flowers. You get the beautiful yellow blooms right in the early spring. But then the foliage, my goodness, it is amazing. The veining on the leaves are just, I mean, it's incredible. It's gorgeous. So this shrub, I think I have to put it somewhere where I can get up close and personal. It's not going to be a back of the border type shrub. But lastly, it also has winter interest because the stems become a deep purple and they're sort of arching stems throughout the winter. I mean, that's amazing. So I am super, super excited to get this one in the garden. This one is a zone 4 to 8, and it takes full to partial sun, and it is a medium-sized shrub. It gets about 6 feet tall and about 5 feet wide. The next plant is a Dianthus, and this one is Dianthus Fizzy. And I have not grown Dianthus in my garden longer than a few months, and in fact I do have Dianthus right now in the garden, but it is a variety that I grew from seed. I can't remember what it's called, but it is actually blooming right now. It got a late start, and I have no idea whether it's going to survive our winters or not, but this is also obviously new to me, and I saw this one. It was so cute, and you know what I really liked about this actually was I love the flowers, absolutely, but I really loved this grassy blue-green foliage. I don't know, it just spoke to me. I thought even when this plant is not in flower, I think I'm going to really like it. Now the flowers are doubles, and they are pink with a beautiful maroon center, and they last from early spring all the way to late summer. This one does form a beautiful little mound, and what I also read is that If you have a spot that has exceptionally good drainage, this particular variety may be hardy all the way down to zone 3, although it's listed as being hardy only down to zone 5. Speaking of hardiness, let me give you the details on this. It is hardy to zone 5 to 9, and it is definitely a full sun plant, and it is drought tolerant. So in terms of size, it gets 4 to 6 inches tall and about 8 to 12 inches wide. And this one is supposed to be deer resistant as well. Now this guy here is a Deutzia. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the variety name is Nikko. And unlike the Deutzias that I've normally seen, which are shrubs, this is actually more of a low spreading variety that acts almost like a ground cover. Apparently it is very easy to grow, and it tolerates a wide variety of soil conditions, but it does prefer soil with a bit of moisture in it. Now this one gets masses of snowy white flowers on slender arching stems in the late spring, and it also has good fall interest, as apparently the leaves turn a beautiful burgundy color in the fall, which is pretty amazing. You gotta love a plant that does double duty like that. And in fact, in this case, triple duty, right? Because you have your blooms in the spring, your ground cover all season long, and then the beautiful color in the fall. So that's pretty amazing. I am gonna be using this one kind of in front of shrubs as a ground cover. It also looks amazing if you have a wall kind of thing and it kind of cascades over the wall. It looks really beautiful in that kind of situation as well. Apparently the blooms are fragrant, although since it's a ground cover, unless they're really fragrant when you're walking by it, I can't see myself bending down to like a foot off the ground to smell them, but we'll see. So details on this one. It is a zones 5 to 8, and it does well in full sun to partial shade. It is 1 to 2 feet tall, and it has a spread of, and this is kind of odd, 2 to 5 feet. So that's a huge difference, 2 foot spread or 5 foot spread. I'm thinking it may depend on how moist the soil is. So perhaps if you have a moisture situation, then it will spread out further than if you're in a relatively dry spot. It does need some annual pruning of dead stems, but I think if it looks as gorgeous as I think it will look, that will be worth it. So this is Golden Towers Elderberry, and it is an elderberry that kind of resembles black lace in terms of the leaves. Like they're very, very deeply cut. But this one obviously is golden, and the color on this one varies depending on how much sun it gets. So the more sun it gets, the more golden it gets. If it gets more shade, then it's more of a chartreuse limey kind of color. Now this one does bloom in early summer, and if you have a variety close by that can cross-pollinate with it, you will get those beautiful dark berries at the end of the summer. What I found interesting about this variety and why I wanted to get it into the garden was that it is more of an upright elderberry instead of kind of like a big sprawling shrub. It is, let me get my facts straight here, it goes to 10 feet tall, but it's only 4 to 5 feet wide, which is perfect because I have several spots along a fence where I don't necessarily want a shrub that will take up a lot of real estate in terms of the width of the shrub, but I do want privacy in those areas. So this will be perfect. It is a zone 4 to 8, and it's full sun to partial shade. As I said, 10 feet tall, 4 to 5 feet wide, and it is both deer and rabbit resistant. So in our area, deer aren't really that much of an issue, but rabbits are a big issue. This one is another elderberry, and this is the more traditional large kind of round shrub. It gets to be, I believe, 8 feet tall, approximately. But the awesome thing about this is its beautiful variegated foliage. It is called Instant Karma. The leaves are green and they have this creamy kind of edge, but even within the leaf itself, it has a kind of lighter green mottling. It's just beautiful. In the beginning of the season, when the leaf's out, the variegation actually starts off as yellow. And as the season progresses, it gets paler and paler, and it ends off the season being a very creamy white color. This one does get white flowers in the spring, and once again, if you have another variety of elderberry that will cross-pollinate with it, it will get those berries in the fall. You can grow this particular variety as either a small tree or a large shrub. In my case, I'm going to be growing it as a large shrub. So details. This one is zone 4 to 7. It is full sun to part shade, 6 to 8 foot height and spread, and it is apparently supposed to be deer resistant as well. Okay, I want you to guess what this is, and I'll give you like 2 seconds. 1, 2, and I bet you're wrong. This, believe it or not, is goat's beard. Have you ever seen anything quite like it? My goat's beard, I do have goat's beard in the border, but it's like 6 feet tall, and it does not look like this at all. So this particular variety is called fairy hair, for obvious reasons. This gets white plumes in early summer, and in fact, you can use it as an alternative to a stilby because it does much better if you have a shady, dry location. A stilby needs much wetter conditions. So this is a perfect alternative to a stilby. The plumes are very similar. Other than the good looks and the fact that you want to touch it, this one is amazing because it is hardy all the way down to a zone 3, and it goes up to zone 7. And the other thing that's amazing about it is it can take anything from full sun all the way to full shade. So really, you can put this almost anywhere. Now, whereas most plants, because a lot of times there are these big ranges in sizes, and I'm not sure exactly how well it's going to grow, when I plant it in the garden, I give it my best shot in terms of I think it'll fit well in here and look good in here, but if it doesn't, I know I can always move it later. This one I have read is difficult to transplant. So I'm going to have to think long and hard about where this goes, because once it's in there, I am going to be very reticent about moving it afterwards. Okay, so I've done all the details here. The only thing I have left is the size. It gets about 20 to 24 inches tall and wide, forming a beautiful little mound. I'm super excited about this one, and also a little terrified that I don't put it in the right spot. Next up are these two, and these are Oakleaf Hydrangeas. I have never had Oakleaf Hydrangeas before. I have a number of different hydrangeas throughout our gardens, but Oakleaf is not one of them. So I'm super excited to try these out. They are 2 totally different varieties. I'll talk about each. Now, I've been meaning to put an Oakleaf hydrangea in my garden for a while now, and I've never gotten around to it. I don't know, I'm a little bit reticent in a way because I don't really see them in landscapes around here. I don't see people putting them in their gardens, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'm wondering if I'm missing something here. As far as I can see, Oakleaf hydrangeas have everything going for them. They have beautiful leaves, they have beautiful flowers that last most of the season, they have gorgeous fall color. The leaves turn a beautiful rich fall color, and they have winter interest because the older stems exfoliate and it reveals a very rich brown wood underneath. So I'm wondering, why am I not seeing it in other gardens in my area? If there is a specific reason why they don't do well in my area, I guess I'll soon find out when they don't come back next year, although they are hardy to our zone. So the first one that I have is a tiny one, and it stays, well, it doesn't stay this tiny, but it stays small. It's a dwarf variety, and it's called Peewee, appropriately enough. And this one gets 3 to 4 feet tall and about 3 feet wide. And both the leaves and the blooms on this one are smaller than the standard. And you can actually even see that right here comparing these two. This one, you can see the leaves are, I would say maybe 3/4 the size of this one here. So this one has a rounded habit. The flowers come on in early summer and it blooms for about 6 to 8 weeks. The blooms, they emerge white, then they fade to pink, and at the end of the season they turn brown and they hang on to the hydrangea and they do provide winter interest. This one here is called Queen of Hearts, and this one gets quite a bit bigger than the other one, and it also forms a nice round mound. The blooms are panicle blooms, which means they're somewhat elongated and they can get up to 9 inches long. They open white, but as they age, they become a deep pink color. This variety blooms just a little bit later than the traditional Oakleaf hydrangeas. And lastly, the fall color. These leaves turn a beautiful shade of mahogany in the fall. Now, in terms of size for this one gets about 6 feet tall and it gets about 9 foot wide. So I'm gonna have to give it, a good amount of space there. Now, for both of these, they're both hardy in zones 5 to 9, and they both like either full sun or partial shade. Okay, so this is a plant that I purchased last year and that I subsequently healed it into the garden because I didn't have the opportunity to put it out in the actual landscape. And then in the spring, it got hot, it got dry, and this did not survive, unfortunately. But I loved it so much that when I saw it again, I bought it again. And this year, I am going to make sure to get it in the ground. And this is a Rose of Sharon, and the variety name is Showtime. Because, look at those leaves. It really is showtime. This is a star of the show, regardless of when in the season you're looking at it. Although, of course, not in the early spring, because Rose of Sharons take a while to leaf out. But once it's leafed out, it's a star. This one blooms from late summer to early fall with semi-double blooms that are light purplish pink with dark centers. You can tell just by looking at it that this is going to be another one that's a tall kind of columnar plant. It will get 8 to 9 feet tall, but only 4 to 5 feet wide. So it's definitely another plant to consider if you're looking for something that provides you a little bit of privacy, but you don't have a really big footprint to put something in there. So this could be the ticket. The one thing about this one that I'm a little bit about is I've seen on several sites that the height is actually listed as 5 feet. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. On most sites, it's listed as 8 to 9 feet. On a few sites, I see 5 feet. So I don't know. I guess we're going to see what happens. In terms of the details on this one, it is good from zones 5 to 9, and it's full sun to partial shade. And once again, 8 to 9 feet tall and 4 to 5 feet wide is what I'm going by. And it is listed as being deer resistant. This is another plant that I never see anywhere around here. And I have a pretty good idea why. This is Scotch Heather, and the variety name is Tib. Now, I see Scotch Heather in so many design books and in other people's gardens, not locally, but when I travel and things like that, and I think it looks beautiful, but it needs soil that's a little bit more on the acidic side. And in our area, our soil is definitely alkaline. Just to put a number on it, the last time we did a soil test, it was around the 7.6 mark. So anything below 7 is considered acidic. So this is one of those that I'm expecting it probably won't do that well. I will mix in a little bit of soil acidifier when I backfill the hole for this one. Now, I'm generally not one that will try to change the conditions of the soil to suit a plant. I much prefer to just put the plant in conditions that it already likes. But in this case, I really wanted to try a heather. I think they're so gorgeous, and I'm literally expecting this not to succeed, but I thought, I'm going to give it a try. I don't have much to lose. I think I paid $10 for this. Now, this one is rated zone 5 to 7, and if it was a little bit hardier, down even a 4, I might try to put it in a pot. But I think that it will definitely have a better chance of surviving if it's in the ground, especially if I do add a little bit of that soil acidifier. Now, this particular variety is a densely branched ground cover, and it has long clusters of pink flowers from late summer to early fall. The dark green foliage is actually beautiful. I really like the foliage on this, and apparently it turns a burgundy color in the winter. This is a zone 5 to 7, and it enjoys full sun to part shade, and it is considered deer resistant. Next up is this guy, and this is a hardy hibiscus, and the variety name is Perfect Storm. I have seen so many amazing hardy hibiscus plants in the last couple of years that I thought I need to get one in the garden and just try it out and see how I like it. And if nothing else, the foliage is amazing. It is such a gorgeous shade of burgundy on this one, kind of burgundy, and the undersides are a green. It's really beautiful. The thing with this one is that it enjoys consistently moist soil, and in fact they say you can even grow it like right alongside a pond or something like this. So I will probably have to put like an extra emitter or something where I eventually decide to plant this one, just to keep that soil nice and moist for it. The flowers are gorgeous. They are a white with kind of pink on the edges. It's kind of like a, I don't know. It's so hard to describe. I'll put a picture of the tag in here so that you can see, and they have a very deep dark red center. This one is hardy from zones 4 to 9, and it's good in either full sun or partial shade, and it's 3 feet tall and 5 feet wide. Look at this, huh? Wow. This is a sedum, and the variety name is Atlantis. It is gorgeous. And, okay, so let's talk about the plant. The leaves are gorgeous. Firstly, of course, they're obviously variegated, and the yellow is kind of a very light buttery yellow. It's beautiful. But in addition to that, the leaves are also serrated. Look at the texture on that. It's amazing. But going a step beyond the amazing good looks right now, this one also has the added feature of when it gets a little bit chilly in the fall, it gets these tinges of pink in the leaves. And I actually saw a few, I picked this one because I really liked its shape and stuff, but there were a few at the garden center that had that coloration on it. And I either took video or took a photo or something, and I'll throw that up here just to show you how beautiful that looks. This one is a low-growing clumping sedum, and it only gets 4 to 6 inches tall, so I think this is basically about it in terms of height, but it does get pretty wide at 10 to 12 inches. And it is hardy in zones 4 to 9, full sun, and this one is rabbit resistant, and it's very drought tolerant. So lastly, I've talked about some of the super interesting varieties that I picked up, and basically all of the varieties, I gotta say, that I picked up are really interesting, and I'm so looking forward to getting them into the garden. But In addition to the interesting ones, I also picked up a couple of plants that I have been meaning to get into the garden for a few years, and these are very standard. I see them in a lot of gardens type plants, but I'm so happy to finally have purchased them and to be getting them into the garden. I thought I would just give a little peek at what those were. And the first is right here, and this is Lady's Mantle. I see this everywhere and I love it. Now, the one thing with Lady's Mantle is that it can be an aggressive self-seeder, and that is basically one reason why I've kind of steered clear of it over the years, but everyone always seems to have such great things to say about it, and so long as I keep on top of deadheading, cross my fingers, I'm able to do that, the self-seeding shouldn't really be a problem. And speaking of its aggressive nature, apparently if you are in the Pacific Northwest, this is considered an invasive plant. So I would probably steer clear of it if you're in that area. One of the awesome things about it is actually both of the plants I'm going to talk about, just two that are kind of in this everybody has them except me category. They are the perfect plants to kind of intermingle amongst your other plants and bring a bit of cohesiveness to your borders. And as you can see, I like growing a ton of different stuff. So I really badly need something that will tie these borders together so that it's not just a mishmash of different plants. The great thing about Lady's Mantle is that it does equally well in full sun all the way to full shade. And along my walkway, I have the walkway to our front door, I have both conditions. I have full sun and I have full shade. So I'm thinking that this would be a great plant to kind of dot here and there. Obviously, I only have one of them, so I'm not going to be doing a lot of dotting just with one of them, but because it does spread rather quickly, I'm thinking that after a year or two, I will probably have enough to kind of sprinkle throughout the walkway. So this one is hardy from zones 3 to 8, and it is 12 to 24 inches tall and wide. And as I said, it's great from full sun all the way to full shade. It's deer resistant, and the one thing about it apparently is that it does enjoy moist soil. So I'm not sure how it would do if you had a dry area, but I am actually planning on putting drip irrigation all along our walkways this fall so that it's already set up and ready to go in the spring. So hopefully that won't be an issue. This is a hardy geranium. Now, I have no idea what variety it is because I lost the tag. Even when I picked it out, I was umming and ahhing. I really love the color, but I'm wondering if it's maybe a little too bold to act as a plant that kind of goes throughout my entire border, whether it's a little bit too much and I should be looking at something that has a little more of a subdued color. But we'll see. Worst comes to worst, if I do decide it's a little much, I can just have a nice patch of it somewhere and that'll be that. Since I don't know the variety, I'm not 100% sure on the specs on this, but I went by Johnson's Blue because it kind of looks like that. For that one, the hardiness would be zones 4 to 8, and it's full sun to full shade. So once again, it's a great plant that you can put all throughout your border regardless of the light conditions. And that, well, Johnson's Blue grows 24 inches tall to 20 inches wide, so we'll see how comparable this is. I'm actually thinking I might end up calling the nursery and or even dropping by and just seeing if someone there can tell me what variety I actually ended up purchasing. And if I do find out, I will add it to the description below whenever that may be. So that is basically all I wanted to show you. The rest of the plants, they are going to be going into the ground this fall, and I'll probably be doing some videos at that point in time and highlighting a few other ones that I purchased. I hope you found this video interesting, and I hope you saw some varieties that were new to you as well, and that perhaps piqued your interest. So now comes the hard part. I'm always so enthusiastic when I go out and buy all these plants, but after I get them home and when I'm about to get them in the ground, that's when I kind of think, oh, I went a little bit overboard, because really the hard work is getting them in the ground, and it takes, like I said earlier in the video, a little bit of doing with our rocky soil. So, and then of course there's the indecision, a lot of umming and ahhing. Should it go there? Should it go there? So I kind of use my best judgment. I put these things where I think they will look good, and then as they grow and fill in, I can always move them around for the most part. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and we will see you next time. Bye.